speakers tonight. And so if everyone wants to go ahead and check your mute, go ahead and put yourself on mute. And then if you don't, then Holly will put you on mute. So if you have a question, just make sure you unmute yourself. You can use the reactions button at the bottom with the heart on it if you want to raise your hand to ask a question. And we are recording this. We try to record all of these so that people can watch them later, and hopefully we'll be able to extract some valuable clips from it. Anyway, I'm Chris Mayhus. I'm with Western Sustainability Exchange, and we try to hold these bull sessions once a month, at least during the months when folks are inside. Once summer comes, springtime, summer, when everybody gets busy, we halt them and we'll begin again in the fall. So last month, we had several speakers join us to talk about the bull side of working on your genetics and trying to create a cow herd that can do well grazing grass and not requiring quite so many inputs, running efficiently. And so tonight we wanted to focus on the cow side of things. And so I will not spend much more time speaking. I'm going to turn it over to Brian Dawson of the Mulvey Gulch Ranch near Boulder. And I knew Brian's predecessor, Randy, pretty well. And I know that Randy worked on the genetics of their herd for many years. And Brian took over here a while back. So I'm going to let him take it over, and then we'll turn it over to the next rancher. But please save your questions for a bit. You can also use the chat, and Holly will be helping out managing that. Brian, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to thank you, Chris, and Holly, and everybody at Western Sustainability for putting on these bull sessions. I'm not always able to catch every one of them, but the ones I do are full of knowledge and good information and collaboration. And thank you guys for all the hard work you do. And then also, I'd like to thank the presenters from last bull session, Roger Indreland, Dale, and Cooper. And I'd just like to give Roger, I don't know if he's on here, but I'd like to give him a little selfish promotion. We've bought bulls from him in the past, and they've always held up to our standards. And we're looking at capturing a lot of his genetics in our herd going forward. So thank you, Roger, you and your family, for all you do. Just a little bit about me and my operation. So I manage Mulvey Gulch Ranch. We're down southwest Montana, in between Boulder, Whitehall, and Three Forks. And we are a corporation and absentee owner, corporation owned ranch. And we're a little bit different than a lot of corporation owned ranches, is that our corporation is a family majority owned. And so we're owned on the majority by one family. And they're a family that owns many grocery stores in Minnesota, Wisconsin. They have their hand in a lot of different ventures, but they're a good family to work for. They're really tight with our family. I tease that we're a corporation-owned ranch, ran as a family ranch. We're unique in that way. Our enterprises right now are mainly a cow-calf. We're focused on our cow-calf operation. At the moment, we've dabbled in the past with the grass-fed finishing operation. And for business reasons, for numbers reasons, we're focusing our attention on cow-calf at the moment. The traits that we look for in our mother cow herd are cows that can handle our environment, that can handle our management, and that develop a good marketable product. And these cows are, for us, black cows, mainly Angus influence, with good feet and a good mind, and low milk, moderate frame, and cows that have a big middle. And what I mean by that is they have a big stomach for rumination. They can handle raising a calf and growing a calf and maintaining their own maintenance requirements. And then we ask these cows to raise and wean a healthy calf and breed back. And that is our main goal, is to have these cows breed back. And we do this by asking them to do it on minimal inputs. And take that base cow, and then we add on our management to that cow. And part of our management is asking them to perform on lower quality feed at certain times of the year. Part of that management is our stockmanship. And we take great pride in improving our stockmanship and using our stockmanship to improve our cows. And then also part of that management is handling them in a low stress environment. And a lot of this stress that we try to take out comes at critical times in the production cycle, such as calving, branding, weaning, preg testing, and then just overall every pasture move or grazing move. We try to minimize the amount of stress put on these cows. And if anybody has any questions on these methods and like how we lower our stress during calving, then we can deal with those at the end, or I can answer any questions offline as well. I'm open to any questions. And so we take this environment and then we add on our management, and how does this affect our animal performance? To be honest, like we've had fallout in the past, and I wasn't here like when a lot of these first management decisions were made. My predecessor Randy was in charge, and he's now passed, but what I have is records, and then from what he's shared in the past before I was here, is they had some fallouts by moving their calving date. They had fallouts by changing their vaccination program. And so what we've taken is a plan to handle these fallout cows and develop them and market them in a separate from our maternal herd. And what we've seen is once we remove those cows from our maternal herd, then those cows that are left have healthy calves, have less dependence on vaccines, have minimal antibiotics, and have less and less fallout. And what we're seeing 20, 25 years later is we have smaller numbers of fallouts, drastic changes. Our fallouts, we take and we call them a notch cow, is we notch their tag and remove them from our maternal herd, and they're now a terminal herd. They are a cow that we won't keep those genetics in our herd. We won't raise replacements out of them or bulls out of them. They'll be a terminal end, and then we'll use them as a marketing tool down the road, depending on markets and market strategy when we offload them. Some of the challenges that we've had with this is just the original fallout, but those numbers taken out previous years have really cleaned up any problems that we've had. And now we notch for anything such as fertility, disposition, conformation, any excuse that we can to pull a cow out of our herd for any reasons that they can't either handle our environment or handle our management. And then the way that we've been able to attack these challenges is just by planning. We plan for any and everything from weather. We have a drought plan. We have grazing plans, and we spend a lot of time planning. And then we have procedures in place to handle anything that comes up the road for us. One of the guys on the ranch likes to use a saying he developed, and it quotes Kenny Rogers' song, "Know when to hold them, know when to fold them." And he developed it to fit our ranch as know when to push them and know when to cush them. And so, like at times when the market is really good for cull cows, we'll push our cows. We'll have a little bit more fallouts, we'll push them. And then what we're left with is the cream of the crop and the ones that we can keep the genetics out of and capture those in our herd long term. And then that's part of our breeding program, is to be able to capture those epigenetics and those genetics in those cows that hold up in our herd for years. And we're right now developing a program where we're raising our own bulls. And we're raising these bulls out of cows that have been in our herd for decades, that have raised a calf for a decade or more. And we're crossing bulls that have held up under our management and under our environment for more than 5 years. And so we're trying to capture that longevity and only keep the bulls that are born in the first cycle. And then we'll wade through those. And then we only keep the replacement heifers out of cows that do not fall into this notch herd. Part of our measurement, I guess our main measurement is economic measurements. We base numbers back everything that we do. We take a few risks, but everything's backed by numbers first. We plan to go through the numbers. We have economic measurements such as return on investment, throughput, operating expenses. We got measurements in the numbers. But ultimately, with our operation, the biggest measurement is something that it's hard to measure. Is we want to make sure that the owner is happy, and nobody's happy losing money. So in order for the owner to be happy, then we have to be making money. And nobody likes to lose money. Some people like to spend money, but nobody likes to lose money. And so ultimately, we want to make the owner happy, which makes our operation sustainable. But we also want to have happy employees, and we want to have happy animals. And so if we could have all three of those, then that would be measurement for us to keep moving forward. And then in conclusion is just, I hear a lot of talk about how do you get cows in your herd? Do you buy, and where do you buy cows, and how do you increase numbers in your herd? And I hear people explain that you need to buy cows that fit your environment. And I do believe that wholeheartedly, but I also think you need to add more to it. And probably what better captures this is you got to match the cows to your context. And part of that context is your management. And I could buy cows that fit my environment that are right up the road, but if they're not pushed the way I push cows here, then they'll fall out immediately. And so if you're going to buy cows, I'd look at buying cows from similarly ran operations that are similar in environment, but also similar in management. And then another just tidbit of advice that's really helped our operation is to continually be improving. And that's with everything: genetics, the relationships, infrastructure, and just be improving and to plan constantly. Those are several things that have really helped us on our operation. And by using some of those methods, we've seen great success in our genetics, and to be able to handle, our hard management. We're essentially making these cows work hard to stay on the operation. And if they don't handle that, then they end up going somewhere else. And that's, in a nutshell, as quick as I can make it.
That's excellent. Thank you, Bryan. Really appreciate you leading off. And Rocco, maybe we'll pop it to you next. And you're on mute, Rocco.
Okay, we good now? Okay. Hey, thank you, Bryan. I'm not sure we've ever met, but I really enjoyed listening to you just now. And I don't think there's much that I would add that we're trying to do. That you summed it up really well. Fitting not only your environment, but the management, I think, is a huge thing. And there's a few little things we might do differently, but as far as trying to find a cow that works for our environment and our management and how we do things, working on getting better all the time, pulling cows that don't fit, all those things. one little thing I might throw in that we're trying this year, our son was interested in cattle and he's been judging in FFA and 4-H a bit, and he wanted to own some instead of just working for the family here for us. It's turned into a good deal because we just decided to identify some populations of cattle, and I like to talk about populations instead of individuals. I'm a big population guy. I think it's easier for me to make good decisions when I pick from population of cattle I like instead of trying to pick an individual animal that I like. And so we went and he purchased some bred heifers. Maybe not the best year to purchase bred heifers financially, but you never know. I guess we'll jump in and see what happens. But we decided to purchase some. We got some from, sorry about that, got some from places where we thought their cattle would fit well in our environment and our management system. And we've picked up about 100 heifers, I guess, from 4 or 5 different places, and then we'll run those with ours. And I think the nice thing with trying that is in 2 or 3 years down the road, we're hoping to see it's a really good litmus test for our cattle as well as the cattle that we've purchased. We'll give them a year or so to some of them fall out and this and that, and to adjust to how we do things here. But sometimes for me, it's hard to really know how do you measure what you're doing? How do you measure what your cattle can do when your cattle are the only cattle that you see under your management system? You can go look at your neighbors, but that's a whole different deal. So we just decided to jump in and we identified 3 or 4 groups of cattle that we like for lots of different reasons. And we just went ahead and we're going to mix them right in. And I guess here in a couple of years, maybe we'll know a little bit more and know how our cattle stack up and how these other cattle stack up. So that's really all I would add to what Bryan had already said, is just a little experiment on our own to try to compare our cattle under the exact same management.
Very good. Thank you, Rocco. Bart, how about you?
I'm sorry I was late and I missed part of Brian's there, but I guess I don't know if I really have much to add, or I guess what's the main thing since I'm late to the deal, Chris, what's the main thing you're asking here?
Yeah, maybe Bart, just going back to when you guys started and with your experience, what the main idea here is as you adapt your grazing management, as you become more aggressive with making changes and improvements, how has that affected the type of cattle that you maybe select for? And how has your eye and your opinion and the decisions you make, how has that evolved as you've seen changes in your grazing system? How has that corresponded with changes to your genetic selection, how you call the type of cow that you maybe viewed today as opposed to 5 years ago, those kinds of things? And are you succeeding? Are you failing? What are you learning?
I'm sure we're doing a little bit of both, succeeding and failing. I think that's the way it goes. Maybe more failing at times, but who knows? We will eventually. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing for us is we pay attention to the cows and how they do in our management. But a big component of ours is the beef that they produce. And I talked about that last time. That's a really big component of what we do. And we track the genetics of each animal that comes through. And so that plays a major role. And we'll make decisions maybe based on that because of the economics behind that, more so than at times than maybe if I was just raising a cow that was performing the best on our place.
Hey, Bart.
But, yeah.
Really quick, a lot of people know you on this call, probably 80% of them, but some don't. Just describe your business really quick, because I think you've got a unique view into the type of beef that your animals are finishing at based on your business model. Just a little bit of background on that might be good to fill everybody in.
We're a grass-fed, grass-finished beef business here in Missoula, Montana. And that's what all of our animals go into that. Nothing leaves here alive. We don't even know live weights. We only know hanging carcass weights. And that's how it works. Even the cows, all of our cold cows, they all go into the beef program, doesn't matter age or anything. Yeah, and what we're doing is we're producing 2-year-old. We're processing all of our calves at 2 years old, 24 months. We start then, and we'll take them to 30 months, and then we'll also, like I said, process the older cows as well that fall out. And then yeah, we got a little mama herd. It's a small herd. It's 130 head of mamas. And we retain all of our own heifers. So we're choosing them every year and bringing them back into our deal. And then we outsource a bunch. But yeah, we've tried about every kind of breed there is. We've sourced from all kinds of different folks because we'll outsource open cows. Not all of them are open. We get to experience other people's genetics and that. And what it's done is it's brought us to where we are. Some cows that I wouldn't have chose based on phenotype have done really well in our herd, and we still have those. Yeah, I guess I'm not probably doing, I don't know. I'm sorry, I had a long day and just walked in the house, so that's about it.
No, that's great. Thank you, Bart. And Bryan Mannix, now I'll bounce it to you.
Yeah, I'm probably the least qualified on here to talk about this stuff because I'm constantly talking to half the guys on here trying to learn myself. But I just took over genetics in 2018, 19. Before that, it was like Scott Barger and my uncle Dave, and I'm still doing it with my uncle a little bit, but I'm taking most of the reins. So I've definitely come up under their eyes and developing a phenotype that we like, and I think it's Johann Zeitzman that says 10 pounds of sugar in an 8-pound sack is like what we're going for. So the brothers started downsizing using AI, downsizing the frame, trying to get like a deep gut, real deep gutted cow that could put a lot of forage in and be efficient on grass. And we went that way for quite a while, kind of leveled out and maintaining right now. But I would say some of the learning curves that we're seeing now is what we touched on last time was just frame size is getting too small of the end product, and the yield on some of those animals in our beef business of our yields have gone down as that phenotype has became the more average. So it's one of those things that learning as they go to try to maintain a grass efficient cow that kind of takes care of herself, but then also on the back end has a sellable product. And how do you make those tweaks and not change anything too extreme under the philosophy of not chasing any one trait? And if you chase one trait, you're giving up something. So just trying to find a well-balanced cow for pretty low milk. I like to think of it as like we're drawing a box, and that box is our management. And then we try to keep kind of basic records on those animals. If you have to suckle a calf or help them with birth, or how many times they ended up calving in second or third cycle. We have a long breeding season on our mother cows. It's 90 days on our mother cows. So anything that is in second cycle more than twice, I don't keep bull calves out of. We historically picked on our heifers more, kind of hand selected, and I've been moving us a little bit more towards picking off the ones that are too small, but giving more things a chance. So like up in our number of heifers that we can expose, and they're getting exposed for right now is 28 days, and they're calving a month later than our mother cows. And then I'm asking them to catch back up a month and calve with the main herd as 3-year-olds. So our yearlings and 2-year-olds are run separate, and then 3 and up is all ran together under one management system. Hopefully my computer doesn't die on me. And kind of some of the purpose behind that is, one, to be calving those heifers on green grass, have less smothering issues with that. And then 2, to just put pressure on them in 2 ways: a short breeding season, and then they have a shorter turnaround time to breed back. So trying to let nature select the most fertile ones there kind of as we go along. I feel like I've had more fails and learning curves than wins in the last 5 years, but everybody says don't make too many changes at once because you don't know what worked and what didn't. Ran into that a few times with changing our calving season and then background on all of our calves and running into some health issues. So there's just like a lot of learning curves there that we went through for a few years. Then I think the other big thing that Roger Indreland talked about it, and then I feel like I had to learn it for myself too, but it was you can push any cow out of your system, right? You could starve a cow to death if you really wanted to. So learning that gray area between what's that animal's basic nutrition requirements and what is propping them up sounds like it should be easy, but it's not always an easy line. And then both in intensive grazing management, like in the summertime with yearlings, I've had to learn that. And then in winter grazing with our mother cows, at some point they just need some supplementation, a little bit of energy or a little bit of protein to get them through. And where's that point is something that I've had to learn a little bit the hard way, I guess, as you develop your knowledge and develop your eye. But that's the basis of what we're trying to do, drawing a box around our management and anything that falls out of that box. That's when majority of animals stayed in them. We have a beef program that we have a nice basis on all those. So it's what the cold cow market's doing affects the profitability of that, but it's always pretty steady at that number. So if we have a higher fallout, we don't really, in the cold cow market's down, we don't lose our ass too bad on it. And that's a competitive advantage for us to be able to push some of our animals a little bit hard. And I've been pretty fortunate to learn under my uncle and those guys. They have killed a couple cows pushing them in the wintertime before. So there's some learning points there. Bulls are tough because they're really muscular, so they look like they're doing all right, but we've killed a couple of them thinking that we could keep going when we couldn't. So there's been some boundaries that we've tested and had to learn within our environment and our management and those genetics and trying to adapt those genetics to us and our management and our context as we go along. Yeah, I think that's what I got for right now.
Great. Thank you, guys. I guess we like lots of open time for discussion and questions, so put them in the chat or raise your hand or go ahead and fire away. And also I'll open it up to, we had 4 of you present last month talking about bulls, but please feel free, Cooper, Roger, Dale, to contribute to the cow side of things. I guess I'll ask one question while we're waiting for people to think about it. Do any of you do, or have you tried unique or interesting things with your younger females? It sounds like from what all of you said that at least for part of the year when they're younger, obviously a lot of times for calving, you're running them in separate herds. Have you done things combining those younger females with the older ones at times of the year to improve your grazing management, to create greater efficiency so you're not moving too many herds around? Have you experimented with things that way to put more pressure on those younger females and to make your grazing management a little easier?
Yeah, Chris, you got me?
Go, yep, go, Rocco.
Okay, yeah. We'll constantly try various things and most of them crash and burn, but some things we learn from them regardless, whether they crash and burn or whether they work. We've run our heifer calves with our cows before, obviously after a few months after weaning, kicked them back in. One year we even calved with them in there. That was not too bad, except we had our heifers in there. So we'll calve everything together some years, depending on where we're calving. We'll have all our heifers with our cows. And one year we even had our heifer calves in there to try to run everything in one group. And sometimes it challenges the heifers a little if they don't keep track of their calf. They'll follow those yearlings around a little bit. And we didn't ever lose anything, but we decided that maybe having those heifers with the yearlings in there wasn't worth the efficiency that we got by running everything in one herd. But maybe it sorts out those heifers that don't keep track of their calves. You sure don't want to sort yourself where you're losing calves, weaning calves at a week old. That's not any good. But yeah, so we've tried that. And then another thing we've done with our calves, and I'm sure other people have done this, there's some older good information out of Nebraska. Rick Funston did a lot of work quite a few years ago on feeding your replacement heifers at a reduced rate from what the standard would be, the NRCS feed standard, whatever that is. And I don't even know those, but not really starving them, but feeding them at like an 80% of that. And that his studies showed that those cattle then for the remainder of their life were able to get by on less. So we'll wean our heifer calves and take, when I say take pretty good care of them when we wean them, we just feed long hay, but we try to feed good quality long hay, and they'll be gaining half a pound to 3/4 of a pound ballpark, depending on how bad the weather is in January and February. And then if we're going to stress them a little, maybe in March, we'd go ahead and reduce that rate a little bit so they're gaining half a pound or less a day. We didn't do any hard research, so we don't know that they're more efficient the rest of their life. But there's some really good research out there from Nebraska, I think, and Rick Funston, and maybe there was some done at Fort Keogh also. I'm not sure, but yeah, anyway, that's some things we've tried.
Yeah, thanks, Rocco. There's a question from Leslie in the chat here. Thanks, Leslie. Do any of you who run heifers with cows have issues with cross nursing and or failed weaning? Heifers learning to nurse cows, etc. How have you eliminated this behavior?
Maybe I'll take on this. I don't know if this will answer your question directly, but our process of weaning these heifers, we fence line wean. We don't throw them back into the herds with the cows necessarily, but we throw a few bred heifers in with the calves after we wean, and that has a couple benefits. It settles them down. It's a little more mature animal that's able to be in there to lead them to feed and to water. And if we do have any cows that we feel the need to throw in with a calf herd or with the heifers, we try to make sure it's not the mother to one of those calves. And we've seen some nursing initially, but after that cow is in there for a little while, she'll dry up, and it minimizes the amount of cross nursing after that. And that's on, say, an open cow, tested open cow that we stuck back in the calves. So we haven't really had an issue with it from then on. And then just another management strategy that we use, and Bryan Mannix uses this as well, it seems, is when we do breed our heifers, we're exposing almost every heifer that we raise on our ranch to bulls, and allow the bulls and the heifers to decide which ones are fertile and which ones aren't. And then we have the opportunity to capture the value of those open heifers still as yearlings before they have too much age on them. And they're ran really well all summer. If they're open, they bring value as an open yearling. If they're not, then their reproductive benefit is thrown back into our herd, and we're able to capture that for future use.
Thanks, Brian. Anybody else want to add to that one? All right. Craig and Connie, do you guys want to ask your question?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. My question is, I heard low milk be emphasized a couple of times, and I was wondering if there's ever issues with first time heifers coming into their milk, having enough milk for the calf that's born. And if you are looking for low milk, what is that EPD what is your break point? Anybody that wants to dive in on that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. If I'm going to look at an EPD, I hardly look at anything over a 21. The lower the better, as far as I'm concerned. We've had issues with certain groups of cows having way too much milk, having bad bags, bad udders. And other than that, they were fitting in with the rest of our herd. And so we looked at some of those bulls to bring that milk production down, a specific trait on a specific set of cows. But typically from 12 to 20 is what I'm looking at. And now that we're raising some of our own bulls, we're looking less at the milk now that we got some of our genetics where we want them. As far as heifers not milking, we've never had a drastic issue with that. We calve everything out and it's on green grass. And I think that gives them a really good chance to milk to their full potential, even without high EPD milk. And if they do have issues with it, then we're able to pull that calf, or that calf just falls out and becomes a bum calf. And then that cow dries up and she's no longer in our breeding herd and she ends up going somewhere else. With our numbers, we can take some of those risks, but eventually it works itself out and then it's no longer a problem for us.
Yeah, I'll speak on the heifers and their milk a little bit just from what I've seen with us. There was a time where I thought we are maybe getting a little bit low on the milk. And then as I watched it a little bit further, I think quite a bit of it was tied to like body condition of those heifers and how they milked so that they were still growing. So if they were not in a very good body condition, that was hurting milk production. And then when I moved them to green grass, that made a significant difference than when they were on hay. Even if they were in decent body condition on hay, their milk production on that grass was quite a bit better as a first calf heifer. So yeah, I think that body condition plays a big role into that milking. And then so when they're calving on grass, they have a lot better nutrition and they're in better body condition. And that made me stop worrying about that lower milk in general.
Might add one thing if you're done there. I think the EPDs are set up for March calving cattle. I don't think they're set up for May calvers like you were saying. But the pendulum for us, that whole milk thing is just swung so far to the high side that I don't think you can. I haven't ever seen any of our heifers not have enough milk. And I think instead of looking at them in whenever you calve, look at them in November and December when you got calves on, if you still have calves on them, and you'll see who your cattle are which cattle produce too much milk, because you look at those cattle in December or November and you got a foot of snow on the ground and you're starting to think that you're going to have to feed a handful of these cows when everything else looks pretty good. And that's where the milk catches up with us, is on the back end. Too much milk, those cows they just can't handle it through December and January, or December, even November, maybe, if you have a little snow on the ground. And I get selling weaning weight, it's just a measure of milk, really. But for us, we sure can't find low enough milk cattle. That's our reality for our management style.
I appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Dan Sanders, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. My question is for Bart, if you're feeling up to it after your long day. If you want to punt, that's fine. But you mentioned something about, if I understood, that there's some phenotypes that you got in that you weren't necessarily what you were looking for, but then they ended up doing pretty good. And then in conjunction with that, you get to see all these carcasses after you're done with them, especially the cows. And is there any surprises there, anything to be learned from seeing the carcasses and what does well on the rail versus maybe what we're used to looking for walking around? Thanks.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, or the cows that surprised me the most were larger cows, like cows that I thought were too big to maintain and do well. They weren't what I would call as an efficient cow. And some of those bigger cows do phenomenal. They hold their body condition really well. And that's actually what we're trying to move towards, some of those that do all that, because we want to get our haying carcass weights at a higher level, because it just seems like our cows have just gotten smaller and smaller every year. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me with that. And what was the second part?
Just since you get to see them on the rail, how is there any that you would have looked at and said that's maybe not a very good cow, or was, and then just to surprise you what you saw on the rail as far as how they finished out or marbling or anything like that?
Oh yeah. I can pretty much judge them based on tailhead, brisket, hooks and pins. I got a really good idea of what they're gonna look like on the rail, but where it really shows up and where it really surprises me is the marbling, that internal muscular fat, because you can't see that when they're standing out there. And some of these animals that are just these cows that just are super fat that carry a calf really well and don't lose their condition in that. Some of them won't marble. None of their calves will marble and that. Some will. And that's where we're really starting to select almost to an individual deal, is like trying to sort that piece out. And I don't know what that indicates. We try to take the whole picture when we do it, which is impossible to do. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer what you're
Yeah,
What's
no,
your-
I just thought you have some insight that most of us don't get to see on the cow side of things. So I was just interested in your thoughts. So appreciate it. Sleep well tonight.
Okay, Jim, you're up.
Hey guys, thanks for all this tonight. My question is, where we're at, we're trying to build a herd. We're trying to get up 200 head bigger than we are. I guess my question is, I'm trying to build it organically through the cows raised here, so we have all the cows are adjusted to everything. But do you think it's better? So what I've done is I've expanded my breeding season on my heifers to hopefully get more heifers in and build the herd that way. And I know I'm losing some on selected for fertility. Or do you think it is better to take a risk on some purchase cattle? Because I know you want to find cattle that are suited to your system and everything, but most of the guys that have them suited to their system really aren't letting go of the good ones. Just some thoughts on that. If it's better to risk the purchase to get your herd where you want it quicker, or is the slow route the better in the long run?
Hey, Jim, I guess I can only speak for kind of what our goals are at Mulvey Gulch. I guess to say it simply, it depends. We're in a similar boat. We're trying to grow our numbers, and it's hard to find cows that fit our situation. And so what we did is, in addition to our notch herd, is we have our open cows, and our gross margins are so high on our bred cows, we can run a cow with little input cost per year, that instead of buying cows that will eventually fall out, is we can use our open cows and we can make money on by running them 2 years and get a calf out of them the second year, and we still make money. That's maybe an option for growing numbers without having to look outside. And some of these opens, they might just need a little bit more inputs to raise a calf. And then as soon as we have a market opportunity where we can sell them and add value to them, then we are looking at that. But that's one thing that we've ran the numbers on. And instead of going out and buying cows that'll may not fit, is we look at the cows that have fit in the past, but for one reason or another, they came up open 1 year, and we can run them even with fallouts on that herd and make money on that and bump our numbers up slowly on those. And then we have a herd, a C herd on top of our A and B herds, that if we get a drought year or market shows a lot of interest, we can offload them at any time and still capture a lot of value on them. So that's one example of what we've looked at. I don't know if that helps you or not.
No, it helps. And we started giving our 3-year-olds a second chance. And the first year it seemed like that might be the ticket because they didn't breed up good. But since then, my breed up's been so good on my 3-year-olds that it's only a handful at a time. I don't know how worth it is. But I also I try not to manage too many herds. So it's hard I'm assuming your notch herd is run separately so you can identify the calves and that sort of thing, so those heifers don't come back through. And right now, with the way we're running things, that just isn't quite an option, but no, it helps a lot. Thanks.
Yeah, we are running those separate, and we're with the operation that we have and the size operation we have, that is an option, running them separate. And so I understand completely.
That's a pretty complex question. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
I'll jump in real quickly. I don't know what you ought to do, Jim. It sounds like you're figuring it out for yourself, and keeping your own is probably the best thing. I say that after just telling people that we're experimenting by buying a bunch of outside cattle and running them with ours to see how they perform. When we got started, obviously we had to buy outside cattle, and then over the years we've bought some. And I think a general rule of thumb for us is when we go in, no matter how much we like the cattle, no matter how much we think they're the perfect cattle for us, expect to cull 50% of them in a few years. And you could say, how do you make it work financially if you're going to expect to cull 50%? It doesn't mean you pull them as opens. They end up not fitting. And much like Bryan talks about, you have different avenues. You take a little better care of them, or you do what you need to get them bred, and then you end up selling them when the market's right. But I think realistically, buying cattle that aren't raised and run under your management system, at best, 50% are going to fall out for one reason or another, realistically.
I agree with you. First, I had to adjust the herd that was already here, and that was a tough part of it because our fallout was pretty bad as we transitioned to May calving and low inputs and stuff. And ironically, because there was about half the herd that was purchased before I got here, and the other half was already here, and the half that was already here had the worst fallout, surprisingly. But they were run under a totally different management style. But I agree with you on that, Rocco.
So Jim, we're in a similar boat as what you said. And you might have heard all this from me before, but basically because of the grazing that we've been doing, now our carrying capacity is much higher. And so we need more cows, or we can run more cows. And ideally, we grow that organically with these genetics that we've been selecting for diligently, but it's really hard to do at those numbers, especially calving and breeding. When we do, we're already walking a fine line of getting replacement numbers. And so we've done all of what's been mentioned. Our breeding season for our yearlings exposure is 45 days, which is 2 weeks longer than what would be an ideal world for me. And then 60 days for our mother cow herd, which, man, I'd love for that to be 45 days. And then we've purchased outside cattle, neighbors' cattle, similar environment. A lot of what everyone said, they do great, even though it's other management. I shouldn't say great, but it'd be like a 70% retention over a few years as opposed to the 50% that Rocco threw out. And then sale barn, cheap bred cows, they'll fall out for under our management way faster than 50% in a few years. It'd be 50% that first year almost, just because of the amount of the management pressure that we put on our cows. It takes a certain type of cow to do that. And we've also run our open 2-year-olds over. They get a special tag in the left ear to make sure we do not select bulls out of them. So we call them open keeps, and they get one strike basically. And they just get run with our mob in the winter, which is no supplement, non-selective grazing, daily moves. Life's tough, but they don't need many groceries. They don't have a calf inside of them. And so that's super cheap, especially when coal prices are really low. We did that for a number of years. And then we've also bought a bunch of heifer calves and exposed them to our home raised bulls. And we've been selling bred heifers. And from those, we'll select off the top 10% just phenotypically, which goes against a lot of my own beliefs. We're over here picking them off of phenotype and infusing the human bias into the equation when I preach that we try and keep that out of the equation. But anyways, we select them, get a calf out of them. And then the plan was that we were going to then flip them. So they're half even composite genetics. Those calves are half genetics from wherever under whatever management. And then we take those heifer calves and put Sebin genetics back on top of them, and that's how we mitigate that risk. And then we'd sell them as bred 3-year-olds. We ended up holding on to them just because we needed the numbers. That was the plan. I wouldn't say any of them have worked the best for us. It just depends on what's happening with the market and what your goals are. And that's a tough one. We're in a similar boat. Tough nut to crack.
Thanks, Cooper.
I got it. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, just a kind of a comment and maybe more of a question, what experiences some people have had. But one of the things I think that where we've failed quite a bit is trying to run cattle, be hard on the development of the heifer calves, and then also leaving them with the cows through the winter and calving them as 2-year-olds. And I think we've come to the conclusion that it's probably the mistake we're making is probably that we're not quite gauging the competition, or quite taking into account the amount of competition that those first calf heifers have to deal with. And so therefore they fall out. And I think recognizing that sooner rather than later, and it can change year to year, it seems. But just curious what other people's experiences have been along those lines. But it seems to me that competition can be a fairly big deal, especially if you're trying to do a pretty good job of grazing, but maybe also trying to get levels of utilization that probably aren't quite fair to those cattle. I'm not sure, but just curious of what other people's experiences are there.
Hey, Roger, I'll weigh in real quickly, although we probably visited about it anyway. But I think competition is a huge thing. We only notice it if we're putting cake out or hay out. But on pasture, unless you're grazing really light stocking rates, I think it's a lot more significant than we imagine. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yes, I'd throw out, this is Dale Veseth, that I'd agree with both the fellows that just talked, that to the point that I actually segregate my bunches. I keep 3 bunches, yearling heifers, young cows, and mature cows. And the reason I spoke here was I think there's, for one, a size difference and then a nutrient requirement difference in each of those age groups. And so I think they need a little different care. So putting them all together, you're putting more harsh treatment or more pressure on your young growing cattle.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. And we've done the same thing where we've, I think, pushed too hard and weren't sure if we were failing to move cattle frequently enough and trying to push too hard for utilization. But we've come to that conclusion. We do need to give that a higher level of attention. And ultimately, I think we only need to bump them nutritionally for 6 months to a year. So we're experimenting with what's the ideal time with that.
Yeah, Roger, you got more experience than I do, but the only thing I'd add to that is our 1s and 2s are separate, but our 3s go in with the main herd, and every fall they're always the worst shape coming out of the mountains. So I do think it's a real thing there. I haven't seen like a super high fallout on those 3-year-olds, but they're always the poorest condition coming home.
I'd throw back in there that I actually go through and weigh my cows. And for example, I think my heifers this year weighed about 875. And then the bred, or my 2-year-olds weighed 960. And if you get into the 5-year-old group category cows, a lot of those are between 12 and 1,300 pound cows. Just the weight alone, that as far as developing a boss cow, the 960 pounder won't be able to compete very well. And even up to 4 years old, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but it seems like my 3s are like 1,050, and then my 4s are about 11. And it seems like they keep growing till they're about 5 years old, or size wise.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Holly, if you're there real quick, I did want to give you a minute to talk about the conference coming up and our training. Do you want to do that real quick? And then we have one more question we'll get to.
Yeah, sure. I mentioned this last month too, but we are hosting KLR Marketing School, and they are from Australia. They were up here last year with Ranching for Profit, and their class sold out within 2 weeks. And we felt like there was obviously a need to get them back up here. But they will be in Helena, June 24th through the 26th at the Delta Hotel. I have information in our newsletters, but if you need how to register, just let me know if you deleted that newsletter or whatever. But basically, what the school teaches is a sell-by formula that helps you make unemotional decisions that benefit your ranch. And so what he really tries to focus on is not what we can't control, but what we can control, which is like our carrying costs, balancing inventories of grass, money, livestock, creating cash flow and profit regardless of the market direction. He was very highly recommended, and this is a great school. You'll get like a 300-page booklet when you're done with the class of everything that you discuss, and probably more, I hope, because 300 pages is a lot to discuss in 2.5 days. But then I also just want to do a plug too, is every year we've done our Expanding Markets conference. This is our 4th year doing that, and it is also going to be in Helena this year. We're hoping to do a ranch tour on the 22nd of September, and then the conference will begin the 23rd and 24th. And fingers crossed, if Old Salt Processing Facility is up, we'll maybe do a tour on that too. But we're actually going to have KLR at that conference too, but just to do a very short 1.5-hour presentation, which it'll be just the high level kind of high points on the school that you could take in June. And then we're also doing another financial opportunity, which is Profit First, which is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it's a really easy financial strategy that any business should be probably operating with. And literally it is just what it says, Profit First. But we're also having like the Nutrient Density Alliance is going to be there to talk about the importance of testing our food and how that relates to consumers, and just a lot of work sessions and a lot of exhibitors. Please mark your calendar for September 22nd through the 24th. And that's all I got, Chris.
Thank you, Holly. The last question here, and it's not the last question, we can go for a while if you guys want to keep visiting. Leslie queued up another announcement I wanted to make. Cooper, I don't see you on video. Maybe you had to go, but if you are still there, I did want to put a plug for their winter grazing workshop that Sebin Ranch holds. It is March 13th, and it's been really great. A lot of good things learned, a lot of good conversations. Do you
March
see the question in
14th.
the chat? Oh, March 14th. Sorry about that. Did you see the question in the chat, Cooper?
I did not.
Okay, I'll read it, and then it really pertains to your workshop. As far as winter grazing goes, do you have specific criteria for when you supplement in winter, such as temperature, snow, body condition, or others? And then Dale responded to that, said, Leslie, yes, we try to supplement 2 pounds per day of 30+% protein every other day, December through March. If we get into bad weather, -20 or worse, then we add a flax greens to make up energy for winter grazing. So I did want to get that in the recording. And then I just wanted to give a plug for your workshop, Cooper, and have you talk a little bit about that and then answer that question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Yeah, 2 big caveats are that we don't calve until the end of May. And so our cows are in their 2nd and 3rd trimester, so lowest nutritional demand through the winter. Much different picture than if they're calving in March or April. And then a lot of our, hopefully you can hear me, it's quite loud over here. My dogs, I just fed all my dogs. We have a lot of cool season perennial grasses that hold their green into the winter and can test anywhere. They can test up to 7% protein. And so it's not like winter grazing crested wheatgrass or smooth brome or something like that. So those are some things in our favor. And because of that, what was mentioned earlier, we run our cows in 3 different groups: yearlings, or 2-year-olds, and then 3-year-olds and upper in one big group. And then in the winter, it's the coming 4-year-olds and older in one group. And we call that our mob. And to date, we haven't given them supplement while grazing, like protein lick tubs or energy or anything like that. But we do feed hay prior to and during storms just to ease the blow. And that's helped a lot. And it's taken a lot of pretty painful mistakes and poor decisions on my part to get to that point. But really, I think the easiest way to sum it up is if those cows are having to burn more calories to get the calories that they need, then you either need to supplement or, as Ranching for Profit says, substitute feed. So supplement with a high dense block or tub, or substitute with hay or a partial ration in order to break past that threshold where they're getting more calories than their maintenance requires, or to match the maintenance at least. And then on our younger cows, when we do winter graze them, they're on a high energy, high protein block, 1 to 2 pounds per head per day. So different class of animal. To Dale's point earlier, they have a complete different nutritional demand. Got a fetus inside of them. They're still growing. Teeth are falling out and changing, and the deck's just stacked against them. And so they need quite a bit more help than our aged cows. And so it's just, as was also said earlier, it depends. But our context, I hope I painted it well enough. Just because we don't supplement our aged cows, I wouldn't recommend that you do that. I would start out supplementing first and then maybe back off from there. We're just able to do that because of what we're dealing with, production cycle that our cows are in, and then the type of grass that we're able to graze. So I hope that answers the question.
If I might jump in for Leslie's comment, we have a April 10th calving date, so we have a little higher requirements than Cooper does.
I might jump in as well, if everyone else is done here, on how do we determine when we need to supplement or feed hay or whatever it might be. Years ago, we got started on fecal sampling. We don't actually do the sampling anymore. I feel like we've done enough years of it that my eye is good enough that we can at least see trend, but we use that a lot. When that manure really starts stacking up, unless it's 30 below, and then it's going to stack no matter what you feed them. But when that manure really starts stacking up, you get a lot of folds in it and everything. They're probably short a little bit of protein. As long as they're on plenty of feed, they've got plenty of forage grass to eat. They're just short a little protein. We shoot for kind of that 6 to 7% protein in the diet in mid-gestation May calving cows, May, June cows. And we're not very good at seeing body condition and change until it's really changed too much. We do watch manure, and it's certainly not a exact science, but it gives us, it's one more tool to use, I guess.
I do want to clarify one thing. When I said we haven't given any supplement to date, let me flesh that out a little bit more. Today was the last day that we're going to be feeding our cows, but we just got done pouring more hay to our cows than we have in the last 12 years. That's, in my mind, substitute feeding. And then tomorrow, because we had them on full feed for so long, and we need to recreate that competitive instinct and that vigor to go out and graze, we're going to throw out some protein energy blocks for them tomorrow. Tomorrow's their first day after being fed for basically 6 weeks straight, which is the longest ever. We're just going to do that to get them excited about life and go back to work. So just wanted to make that clear. I didn't want anyone walking away from this thinking we hadn't been feeding our cows through this real winter that we've been having.
Hey, Cooper, can I ask what's the snow look like right now where you're at? Just to get a reference for what I'm looking at.
Jim had all left. And I haven't seen anything like this except for a May snowstorm. It all left in 2.5, 3 days. It's gone down in our winter grazing zone. Yeah. We got a real Chinook here in the last few days, and it's just gone. It's unbelievable.
Ours is going quick, but today's the first day that you can see the top of the sagebrush. So, yeah.
You got some time then.
Yeah. But I was just wondering because I think we're going to be feeding for a little bit longer yet, especially if it gets cold and this stuff freezes hard. But I just wondered, out of reference. Thanks.
And it was mentioned briefly before we got to answering the question, but yeah, that workshop again is March 14th, Cooper, and just get a hold of him directly. If you need his email, you can get that off our website or you can get a hold of us, but happy to get folks more information if you're wondering about that. Any other questions or discussion? Like I said, happy to keep this going. It's been very informative and appreciate everyone's input. And then Cooper just put an email in the chat. Rocco, go ahead.
Just a side note, we've been feeding our cows for a while because of this deep snow and tough conditions. The first time I can remember in a lot of years, we even brought in all our horses, and we run about 60 horses for my family's guest ranch. And this is the first time in a long time that we've even considered bringing horses closer to the place. And they're still grazing, and they're doing fine grazing because they are the perfect winter grazing animal. I think they're better than a bison. I don't know, but they can graze through a lot of snow. But it's funny because we're not clear yet. We still have a foot of snow or so. If it freezes up, I think we'll even have to feed the doggone horses, which almost never happens. This will be the first time I've ever remembered it. So, yeah.
Anyone else got a question?
I guess I kind of wanted to plug a book. I think Cooper will probably back me up, but I really thought one of the best practitioners he studied everywhere was that Johann Zeitzman, and where he'd work with Bonsma and Lassiter's and Savory. There's a lot of books out there, but if you're just going to read one, I really thought he had a nice handle.
Yeah, and the title of that book is Man, Cattle, and Veld.
Yes.
You're right, Dale. I would back you up on that. It's great. Invaluable, I think, that book and what he's put together. He connected a lot of dots, in my opinion.
Excellent. One last call for questions. And Dave Scott in the chat said that, thank you, everyone. He even learned something tonight about sheep. So Dave, way to apply it to your context. I love it.
I just want to tell WSE for give them a thanks for doing this and being a board member, and appreciate everybody's attendance.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Roger. As mentioned, folks that didn't make it tonight but would like to view this later or any of the bull sessions, they are available. Just let us know, have people reach out to us, and happy to have you all here, and especially to our speakers both last month and this month. Thanks so much for sharing. Really appreciate the information. Good night, all.
Chris. Thank you.